It takes a while to learn self-discipline. The self-discipline I got from becoming a potter was a huge change in my life. All the things that we do that we love ultimately will, cause us to maybe improve the way we do things.
When someone, and any artist knows what I'm talking about here, white paper, it's like, you're so nervous, this white paper, and then all of a sudden you put your brush to the paper and everything changes, and it allows me to be expressive, and it empowers me to be my creative self.
You're listening to Ask Angela, the podcast that answers your questions about how to improve your mental health, connects you to diverse voices of wisdom and expertise, and helps you get the tools and strategies you need to live a more connected life. Today, we're exploring a topic that's close to my heart, art as medicine. We'll be talking about how creative expression, especially through pottery and painting, can serve as a powerful tool for healing. In today's episode, we'll hear from two local artists, Caren Gagne and Pat Stamp, who have used their own mediums, not just as artistic practices, but as pathways to mental wellness. Hi, Pat.
Hi, Angela.
How are you today?
I'm great.
Good. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So today we're talking a little bit about art and creativity as an outlet for expressing our experiences in life, and with respect to, mental health kind of experiences, and how art in a way can be a form of medicine, if you will. And so I was really excited to ask you to come in and talk about who you are and what type of things you do as far as creativity to sort of express or explain how art can be medicine.
Right.
Yeah. Did you want to start by letting us know what type of art is maybe your forte?
I will.
Pat Stamp?
Well, I spent my working career as a professional potter, and I retired when I was 72 from basically full-time potting. And at the height of my career, I was sending my work to 14 stores across Canada. So I was what was known as a production potter. And I did most of the work myself, although I always had an employee in the summer. I hired a summer student to help me out. And I also had a shop at my studio so that I had customers coming from all over the world. So that's essentially what I did. But in 2016, when I was just coming up to 72, I decided maybe it was time to retire. And that was also when we were going to sell our farm and move into the city. So that all came together at once. And then at the time, my family, my husband and sister in particular, didn't want me to sell my studio. They were saying, well, you may regret it. And my sister said, why don't you just do it as a hobby? And I said, well, that's a bit like asking a galley slave to take up rowing after they've been freed. But as it turned out, I did take it up as a hobby after, and that's how we met at the North Bay Potters Guild.
Yeah, it was. So why did you choose to become a potter in the first place?
Well, it was an accident. I'd like to say it was all part of a great design, but it wasn't. When my kids were in school full time, I had been out of the workforce for about 9 years by that time, and I realized that before I just jumped into a job, I should maybe try and figure out what kind of job I wanted. And so I started off by doing volunteer work, and I was working at the Nipissing Developmental Center, and I just gravitated towards doing art with the kids, and I introduced them to clay. These were kids with both physical and intellectual challenges. They needed lots of stimulation. They needed to develop their fine motor skills. Mm-hmm. So I thought clay might be the solution, and I knew nothing about clay. And our first experience together was a disaster. So I decided that I would follow one of my friends who was taking a pottery course at Canadore. So I signed up for one course that was part of a full program. And I didn't know there was such a thing as a professional potter. I thought, well, you could do it as a hobby. And if you were really good as a hobbyist, you could teach other people to do it as a hobby. I was totally ignorant of this studio pottery movement. And what an incredible contribution to the arts and the culture of many, many communities pottery had. And I became hooked. So the second year I went back as a full-time student. And then in 1978, I opened my studio.
Well, I have been doing pottery now for 5 or 6 years. And, I think anyone that may be listening who may have taken a class knows that pottery, especially throwing on the wheel, can be quite difficult and frustrating to master. And so you were hooked. And so do you think, why people stick to it when at times it can be quite challenging to start? To me, I equate it to, golfing in a way as well. You'll golf and you'll maybe hit the ball like once and you're just like, it's so victorious for you. And some of the other ones for me personally is like, it's very challenging in a way to golf. And I feel the same way about potting at times with throwing on the wheel. So I understand that frustration. So I'm curious, why do you think people, stick with it?
Well, there are a couple of reasons, or about maybe more than one. When I was teaching, I taught part-time off and on at Canadore, and I noticed that there were a lot of people who came out to night classes who worked in healthcare and who were high school teachers, people with stressful day jobs, and they took pottery to take them out of themselves. And they didn't realize how much it would take them out of themselves, because when you first start learning to center clay and throw on the wheel, it's challenging. And so you really have to focus. It's not about brute strength. It's about focusing and really concentrating on what your hands are doing and what your hands are feeling. And so what was happening was I could see that people, first of all, would be frustrated. But while they were frustrated about that, they weren't thinking about their day job. They were totally into it. And as they became more skillful, you could see them relax into the process. And the whole process of throwing on the wheel and hand building as well, sculpting, is very meditative. And you can really get out of your head. And I think that's what happens when people are, and they use centering clay. The clay has to be completely in the center of the wheel before you can achieve anything. And that whole business of centering your mind and being focused, that's what pottery is all about.
Yeah, it's so connected. That's so true. Just being able to center and focus into,
There are other big lessons to be learned from pottery too. And one is that the clay can always be recycled and reformed. And so even though that piece of clay may have given you some frustration and you've had to schmuck it and roll it back up into a ball, there's another pot waiting to be made with that clay. It's a metaphor for starting over, for being reformed, for just, there's a reason why all the holy books of all the great religions reference pottery. It's because there is this redeeming quality of the material to make you want to make it better, to make you want to try again. That isn't to say some people don't just give up. But the point is that you trade one kind of stress that you might have during the day for another stress in the evening. But ultimately, that turns into something really, really satisfying. And when you get to the point where you can actually throw a pot and you've got a rhythm going, it's very meditative. It's very relaxing. And it's really why I stayed in that career for almost 40 years. Well, it's be almost 50 now when you think.
Well, you're still teaching and you're still really involved with the guild. You were on the board and have recently ended that term. And I'm quite sad about that, as you know, because I'm on the board. But yeah, you've contributed in so many ways. I mean, the way that I have even made plates now because of the way that you teach and the way that your philosophy around this type of creative outlet, in a way, you're so passionate about it, and it translates so beautifully, like, to your class. And we all just love taking your class. Your class fills up in moments.
Well, I get as much as I give in a class, because seeing people succeed, seeing people make breakthroughs, I feed off that. It's great.
Yeah, that's. Can you tell the story? Because remember that one class that we did, you brought us that little piece of clay, and just how you look at the history of clay and the hands, on your pots, and the hands of potters. Right.
Well, I've been gifted some absolutely lovely, to me, pottery shards from my own travels and from my sister-in-law's travels. And if you go to an archaeology site and you have a conversation with an archaeologist or someone who's just, working there and wanting to be an archaeologist, they discover you're a potter. They want to share with you. They want to talk about it because you see, so much of what we know about the ancient past, we know because of pottery. Because once you've made a pot and fired it, whether you've fired it in a pit in the ground or in a kiln, high-tech kiln, that fired clay, some part of that will always remain, even if the pot breaks. And there are messages in that pot. There are the throwing lines, the fingers that made that pot, the thumbprint on the handle of the pot. All of that speaks to me of someone who was doing something, maybe 2,500 years ago that I'm doing now. And I feel greatly connected to that. And I'm also really connected to the fact that there's a really strong belief that it was women who were the pot makers initially, because it was associated with food and gathering food.
Right.
And so the evidence is there that what became, really important in telling the history of humankind can be laid to the work of early women potters.
It is such a beautiful thought of that connection to the early women potters and how connected you feel to them. And then also when you're talking about even being on the wheel and focusing and finding that sort of connection within yourself, that's a beautiful way of looking at, this very conversation in the way of connection,
right?
Connection to self, and in our community here at large as well.
I felt really privileged to do what I did, because not only did I do work that had this wonderful meditative quality to it. Like, had I been working for someone else in another job, I never would have put the hours in that I did to my own work. Now, that can be said for anybody who owns their own business.
Right.
But the process suited my personality so much, and the meditative part of it. But at the same time, when I was doing it professionally, my job was my stress, that although it is a stress reliever, it can be a stress maker. When you've got an order that you have to ship to a store in British Columbia and they don't want to wait for it, it's stressful. Or
it's a time crunch.
High pressure, or when you've got, 2 dinnerware sets in your kiln and the kiln overfires and you've just lost, $3,500 to $4,000 worth of work.
Wow.
Now, fortunately, that didn't happen very often, but there was always that possibility.
Of course. Yeah. So what would you say keeps you doing it after so many years? Sort of the high level reason, in a way.
Well, I think some of the things we've already talked about, kind of drive that interest.
Yeah.
And also, traditionally, pottery was always passed down within families, from my kids don't want to be potters, never did. But I feel like I have all of this information under my belt that I've, been learning since 1976. that I want to pass on. I want to be able to mentor and help other people with this, and see the craft thrive in the community. It just something I feel strongly about.
Mm-hmm. And so it was a happy accident in the beginning with you sort of stumbling upon the clay. And when you're looking back, would you sort of agree, or what do you think about saying that, doing pottery is medicine for people?
Well, it was certainly medicine for me, because I was a bit of a wild child. Not wild in the sense of I didn't have any structure at home. That's what it was. I was on my own from a really young age after my parents split. So I really had no discipline. And when there's no discipline imposed on you, it takes a while to learn self-discipline. And
That's true.
The self-discipline I got from becoming a potter was a huge change in my life. Now, mind you, having children makes you disciplined too, because you have a responsibility. Mm-hmm. Having a garden makes you disciplined. Mm-hmm. All the things that we do that we love ultimately will, cause us to, maybe improve the way we do things. So I think the pottery really gave me a focus, and for most of certainly all of my childhood, I was very unfocused.
Right. So what have you been doing lately that, you might want to sort of share as far as projects? What direction are you going right now that you've kind of retired?
I've been really working hard making a garden, because when we left our home in the country, it was a bit of a wrench, because we had built our own home and built all the buildings on the farm, built my studio, built the gardens, all of that sort of thing. But when we reached, when my husband and I were approaching or in our 70s, we knew that, that we would have to move. And leaving the country and leaving my garden behind was really hard. So when we moved in to our new home in 2017, I became a demon gardener, and I set a goal of myself that by the time I was 80, I would have the garden ready. Well, I turned 80 last winter. Mm-hmm. It's not quite ready. I'm still going to be working hard on it.
Ready for what?
Well, ready for it to kind of nurture itself.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I've been gardening, and I want to teach but a workshop in teapot making in the fall, because I was making a teapot for my grandson, and I had so much of a reaction from the other members of the guild over it. I said, okay, I'll do a workshop in the fall. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
That's beautiful. Hopefully I can be available to sign up for it. I haven't seen it come through yet. Thank you so much, Pat, for coming in today and sharing your gift and your story. So beautiful to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
Nice to see you.
Nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me here today.
You're welcome.
In this lovely studio.
Yeah. So nice to see you in here, because you are my mother. And so I see you in all kinds of different areas of my world. But I'm really honored to have you here today speaking to art as a form of medicine in a way. And I know that you are extremely talented. Somehow I've maybe missed out on that, but that's a whole other podcast. But so just talking about healing, and how that looks in your kind of world, where talking about healing between our inner and outer kind of worlds, where your canvas is like a paintbrush.
That's
as
right.
well.
Yeah. And well, I've been painting and for a long time, for many, many years. Actually, I thought about it this morning, and it's been over 25 years now that I began. And painting actually enriches my lifestyle in so many ways. It brings out. It's all about passion, and it's all about bringing out that passion. If you're a true painter, and I say that nicely, if you're a true painter, you're passionate about what you want to do and what you want to express. And when I pick up my brush and I begin to sketch, whether I'm sketching outdoors in plein air or in my studio, I find that it's meditative for me, very, very meditative. And the process, it could be many, many hours can go by even before I even look at my watch and or even ask what time it is, because I'm just so engrossed in the process and just loving it. It's and that in itself is healing for me.
This passion that you speak of. When did you notice, that this was sort of a medicine for you in a way?
I believe I noticed that again years ago. It's something called white paper. When someone, and any artist knows what I'm talking about here, white paper, it's like, oh, you're so nervous, this white paper. And then all of a sudden you put your brush to the paper and everything changes. And it allows me to be expressive, and it empowers me to be my creative self when I have the brush to the paper. And a whole world opens up to me.
I think that has to be a pretty special connection in a way. I'm going to say that I have, and because you've taught me a few things like watercolor and even using acrylics. I don't tend to get that flood of. I get more like anxious about it because I feel like I get in my head around it. But you feel this beautiful like kind of flood, and the world sort of opens up for you.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
That's beautiful.
And you mentioned too before when did I start painting?
Yeah.
And it has been over 25 years. And actually it was my mom who, and you talk about, me maybe giving you some of that incentive. It was my mom who asked me to come with her to a convention in Las Vegas in 1998. And of course, I was in business back then, raising up to 4 kids and that. And
Up to 4.
Yeah, up to 4 kids. And, and I just said, well, I don't think that, I kind of chalked it off as something frivolous at the time. I'm so glad that she insisted, because from the moment that I went into my first class at that convention, and it was a watercolor class, I just looked at her and I just smiled. I went, oh my gosh, this is it. It felt like home, actually, and I was hooked. And from then on, even painting as a child, I think that you carry that with you in life. You really do. You carry that with you. And then again, life got in the way, and now that I'm retired and have been for a few years, I'm taking my painting very, very, very seriously. I'm have personal, goals that I have, set for myself, and in the last 2 years, actually, in September, I'll have my master's in my watercolor. And that's through David Rogers in California. And I've learned everything with them, techniques and everything to do with watercolor, where I can actually train other people and teach other people. And I have been teaching adults and children now.
Yeah,
so
you've been teaching for years.
Yeah, I have
all kinds of different, really awesome
different
courses.
mediums. Yeah, different mediums. But now I'm teaching them techniques and values that they can take home and apply to their own art, which is important. It's called passing it on.
Yeah.
And I believe in that.
And you've traveled for some of these courses and went to California last year, I believe, for a course. And where are you going next?
Next, I'm I'm leaving for Ireland, actually.
Yeah.
And in actually the Ring of Kerry, if anyone is familiar with Ireland, down in Kerry County, I'm going to be staying at West Cove House with artists from around the world, actually. I've just been blessed to be able to do that. And we'll be training in oil, which is a different medium for myself, but one that I will approach with the same vigor and enthusiasm that I approach everything else with.
Art, yeah.
So, of course, being in Ireland, I'm sure we're also going to be having some social life too at some of the pubs and
sure, seeing the other kind of landscapes and art.
Yes,
that way.
exactly. The other landscapes.
Yeah.
That's right, and the music, and there will be poetry. And see, I always believe music and art and food and fun go together. So
that's true.
Yeah.
And so you also, speaking of music, you also are a musician as well and play the guitar.
I am. I play the guitar. I also teach the guitar. I have been teaching for close to 20 years now.
Yeah.
And I enjoy it. I have not only adults that I teach now, I'm beginning to teach children. And I have a complete set for the children to teach them on a different level, but where they'll go from strumming to actually playing songs. So I enjoy that. I also play the drums a little bit and
the
bass.
Violin as well.
And the violin. That's right. Yeah.
Multi-talented musician. And so you do all of this where? Where are you located?
I'm located in Rutherglen. I do a lot of my watercolor paintings right up on Mount Pleasant in my home. The lighting is perfect. Lighting is very important. And I do my large acrylic, sometimes up to 64 by 64 abstracts in my garage. I need to be able to literally throw the paint, and that's where I do that. And I display all my work in my art gallery, the Artist House in Rutherglen. That's what it's called, the Artist House. And I also encourage other artists to come and have their exhibits at my place also. And that's something that I'm working on now. Applications are going forward with that. And I have a couple of artists that are quite interested in it and want to be part of the Artist House. So I encourage that. And I would like to, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about my creative process.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
That because it's important for people. Like I mentioned, the white paper. So you sit down with a piece of white paper or white canvas, and it can take a lot to apply that brush or the strokes to the canvas or that. So I always start with a thumbnail sketch. That's how I like to begin, and that is, it dictates the shading, the values, and then I set up my palette. That's important, to set up your palette. It's like planning. You wouldn't build a house without planning. You wouldn't build a picture without planning. There's planning stages. So when you set up your palette, I always set it up from the warmest shade to the coolest shade. And I usually keep my palette very, very, very simple. And that provides the harmony in a picture. It provides the harmony, and then I begin painting using all my principle and elements of design, and that is that the principle and elements of design are the language of painting. So
the language of painting.
The language of painting.
What does that mean?
Well, the language of painting.
In like a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, there's 7 elements and 8 principles, basically.
Okay.
Basically, elements are size and shapes and lines and directions,
right?
Color and value and texture. And my 8 principles of design are dominance is the big one, balance, contrast, gradation, variation, alteration, harmony, and unity. And those are, when I teach a course, an art course, especially watercolor, I try to instill some of those principles and elements of design in the students' heads so that they can analyze their paintings more. And it just becomes easier for them to actually focus and actually see, oh, yeah, there's the harmony, there's the dominance, there's the values.
Yeah.
So,
beautiful. And how do you see in your students, this idea that art is medicine? How do you know that that's true for your students and for yourself even?
Well, absolutely. I mentioned passion before, and it's just a feeling that you get inside. And when I see my students sitting around, and generally I don't do any more than 6 in a class, and they're all starting out very nervous, and then you see the progression in a painting, and you see the smiles on their faces, and they go, I didn't think I could do that. That right there is the empowerment I was speaking about.
Yep.
Some of them come in and most of them say, I can't even draw a stick man.
Well, that's
a stick
me.
person.
I say that. I say that.
And I just say, oh, yes, you can. Yes, you have to believe in yourself. They walk out with a beautiful painting and they just feel like they're 10 feet tall. They're going to go home and frame that. And it's frameable. So I always believe that, I know it sounds like an old cliche, but strong people can empower strong people. And that's where I start. That's my base. That's where I start, with that. And always encourage the students because you know that it's in them and they can do better, and every time they come, they just seem to, they know they're starting to learn their techniques and the values and
building on that.
And that's right, exactly. And they build on that exactly. They build on that, and their next painting is generally just as good, if not better.
Right.
So just holding their hands and bringing them along in the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you come back from Ireland, then what do you have planned for the studio? What's coming up for you this summer with your art?
Right. Well, I am going to have probably, I always like to have a spring show and a fall show where I'll be exhibiting primarily my art, but also the works of any local artists that want to be a part of it. Absolutely,
yeah.
I like to encourage them to come in. I've even I also am the president of the Beach Guild, the fine art in Toronto.
Yes,
and we're having a show this weekend, which because I'll be in Ireland, I won't be able to attend, but I've also And this has been put on the agenda that there are going to be some of those artists coming up and staying. I'll be providing accommodation for them, and we'll be painting in Algonquin Park.
Oh, beautiful.
And when you come from Toronto to Algonquin Park, they're very excited about that. So those are a couple of things I have planned for the studio. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, along with the I'd also like to teach people more about teas and have little tea sessions. I am a tea master. So because of that, there's an awful lot about teas, origins, and so on, that I want to learn. I want to learn myself, and I also want to teach some students who are willing to learn that part of the artist studio. So, and I think that that will bring, as far as healing and as far as mental health, this is so good for your whole psyche. When you're applying paint to a canvas, it's just relaxing. Again, as I said, meditative, and I'm totally engrossed in the process and in the techniques and
you have so many outlets too, like your creative outlets with the tea and the singing and the playing guitar and painting. It's beautiful. Thank you so much for coming in today, Caren/mom. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and how art for you is medicine, and how you guide others toward that kind of calm, focused, way of being that allows them to grow in a way that they maybe didn't think was possible. So
exactly.
Thank you so much for coming in.
It's been my pleasure.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to learn more or find out about services or groups that I offer, you can go to my website, therootedheart.ca. You can find this podcast on my YouTube channel at The Rooted Heart, and they're also available on Apple and Spotify.